Welcome back to the Pure Signal podcast on the scene here at Adobe Summit in Las Vegas. Really exciting week with the Adobe Summit happening. Myself, Ryan Medellin, a manager at our marketing solution practice, as always, joined by our North America CEO, Kevin Erickson. And this is a really exciting episode of Pure Signal because we have an industry leader in the digital space joining us, as Sajid Sayed is here, and he is in person here at Adobe Summit. And we'd like to thank Kevin and I that we've had a busy Adobe Summit, but we would be remiss if we did not mention how busy you've been. You've been on healthcare panels. You've met with a lot of different folks. But first off, Sajid, thank you for joining us, and would love to just hear a little bit of background about you.
No, absolutely. And thank you for the invite. I really appreciate you guys, getting me on the podcast. Just a quick background inside the digital acceleration initiatives in my current role, which basically means that I sit at a very cautious intersection of ambition and accountability. So really working with, multidisciplinary teams in terms of optimizing how we move forward in terms of innovation, but with some guardrails of trust and infrastructure, because in the healthcare and pharma space, I'm sure you guys will appreciate that there's very little room. I would say it's almost non-negotiable to have any form of deviation in terms of compliance, governance, regulatory, and patient impact, which is paramount for us.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that later on. I think we have a lot to uncover there. But one of the first things I wanted to ask you, so we did an episode a couple of weeks ago leading into Adobe Summit and just the general vicinity of how to approach conferences like this from a strategy standpoint. And, we talked about what we've experienced and what, some of our clients have experienced, but would love to hear your approach to coming to a conference like this in your role and what you're seeing, what you're looking for, and just when you're on the scene, how to kind of stay present and what your goals are.
No, absolutely. And I'm always excited when I come to these conferences. But for me, these conferences are more like inputs. They provide me with some form of strategic guidance of what the innovation is and how we are innovating, and really weaving that into the broader product strategy roadmap that we are envisioning to help us with our strategic and organizational goals. But what is very, very important is that that you take whatever you see from these conferences, like for example, product demos, right? They actually do have a caveat now. I don't know if you may have noticed that, but they say all the data is fictitious, but this is how it will operate. But when you take that and when you try and translate that to your operational team in terms of understanding how do you operationalize that, that's a different conversation altogether. So for me, it's very important to take the inputs, but then really sit down, and most of my time during these conferences are the larger amount of time that I take is going back to my hotel room and just sitting down and pinning down, like, how do I weave this in? Who do I need to bring in on this journey? When do I need to bring them on this journey? And how do I articulate our broader strategy roadmap in terms of the value and the proposition that this innovation will bring in? So that's really how I take conferences. But outside of that, water cooler conversations and unexpected conversations just like ourselves that we're having today is really the crux of really creating that breakthrough and pioneering some more innovation.
I love that. It's such an interesting from all the different roles we play, and even from mine, where it's a bit of hanging out with clients and working through that. I love that part of it. It's a great place to do that. We also have a lot of our team from around the world is together, so you get a chance to do that. But one thing that I found on my own is that I don't have much chance to go to some of the learning. So you learn through the water cooler moments or those elements. But I love that you're able to do that, because I think, and even a little bit, I'm going to hide out a bit before I leave this week, partly to do some of that element of like you have a chance, because the day job doesn't change.
No.
Right. I mean, like you still have to go do that as well. So I love that you're learning, which really leads to my questions. Like, what is some of this stuff can be this week and as you've been here, or just even in general, is that things are changing so rapidly.
Yes.
And so I'm just curious in your role, where your role implies change, and working through that. I'm just kind of curious, what are the things that you're seeing and how that plays out? How does that play out to things you're excited about, or maybe some of the things that I really don't know where this is going to go.
No, absolutely. And that's a good question. That's a great question, actually. When you are attending these conferences, especially during the part of last year or this year, I think, AI is the new buzzword, right? So it's everything and everyone wants to focus on AI. And just like how we saw it in the summit, there was a heavy focus on depersonalization and personalization at scale. So for me, it's really taking, that AI framework, and how do we take that AI framework in a way where we input that in our day-to-day working in the healthcare and pharma ecosystem, right? Where there's a lot of compliance, regulatory, and governance. So for me, it's to take what we have seen and look at the concessions that we need to make and the buy-ins that we need to get, and then create that robust architecture that actually helps creating the better patient impact and the treatment outcomes that we're expecting from our healthcare providers and patients.
Yeah, I love what you said there, and I'd love to hear more about that because I was always, wondering and working in the healthcare and life sciences space, when you're at this inflection point of acceleration and innovation, when does that regulatory requirements and all of those things that you have to consider, when does that come into the fold? Is that from the forefront, or is it like, let's take the ideas and then work our way back into how it fits? And maybe it's both, maybe it's a little bit of each, but would love your thought on that.
Yeah, so this is my personal opinion on it. So and I'm a heavily opinionated individual as well. So my personal opinion is that there's a clear distinction that one has to make, right? There's a distinction between an idea and innovations. You don't have to think about idea as the innovation. Innovation basically means, at least for me, and my definition for innovation is that innovation is something that has governance built in as an infrastructure of trust. And that's very, very important. And to answer your question, based on my experience over the decades of work that I've done in different organizations, I think that's very, very important, especially more pertinent in healthcare and pharma and life sciences, to bring your compliance, your governance, and your regulatory folks really at the forefront, rather than leaving them at the very edge, because then it becomes very difficult for them to understand the end goal, the vision, the impact, and the role that they play. So you have to bring them as co-creators. So innovation right now, it's all about collaboration. It's co-creation. Think about the agentic framework that folks want to implement in the industry, but it's the inverse of that. So you need instead of the agents, you actually need the humans to work together first so that they can implement the agents, right? So it's very, very important.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, we've mentioned it multiple times on this podcast, but we always talk about how all these different parts of the business that normally, played in their own silos, and they'd have the touch base meetings every once in a while to see what each other were doing.
Mhm.
But now with the opportunities and abilities opened up with technology and AI, we've always talked about like what that role looks like at the inflection point of like, I've got to make all of these different parts of the organization see this vision, come together, all for this common goal. You are that role. And I think that's why we're so happy to have you on the podcast, because
Thank you.
talking about bringing on the compliance and regulatory requirements, and then you're also dealing with, the marketing folks, the technology folks. You are having to weave all of this together to
Yes.
achieve the vision that you're trying to create. I would love to hear what that experience is like, and how busy that keeps you in your day-to-day job.
Absolutely, and it's the immense support that I get from my peers, from my immediate leaders, and the executive leadership in our organization. But to answer your question, quite simply put it, I do sometimes feel like I'm a symphony orchestrator. Standing there and orchestrating a myriad of different, I would say, musical instruments, and in really penning down the exact moment at the exact time of how things have to be planned out. But you can only do so much, right, from your side, which is why it's very important as an individual, and the lens that I have, I don't bring in the compliance subject matter expertise or the governance subject matter expertise. I have an idea that guardrails should be there, but really bringing everyone on and getting them bought into the vision is very, very important, and that takes a lot of my time. So organizing meeting invites, making sure that I'm able to articulate the vision and showcase the value add and the impact that it brings in from an organizational perspective. I think that is what is very, very important, and that is what takes most of my time in terms of making sure that the vision is articulated, everyone's bought in, and then we actually rally up the troops of the folks that do all the groundwork and start delivering in an incremental, systematic, sustainable, scalable way.
Yeah, I think, we always talk about how important the people aspect of all this is, right? Like whether it's the directors or the leaders of the company talking about these conversations and the things they want to do. And you just mentioned it there at the very end of like, there is this really important aspect of once these things are established, or once we kind of pick that direction, there's a ripple down effect that we have to account for with our people. You and I had a little bit of a conversation in our pre-show meeting about making things infectious and the storytelling element of all this. So I would love to open up your brain on just how you approach that, kind of leading off of that last question.
No, absolutely. And there's a way to do it, right? And you have to evolve. I think Kevin Ryan, you quite simply put it. And I was giving this example in one of the panels that I was speaking on. That from the time when we saw storytelling, which is very, very important, and the way technology is evolving, we have to really evolve ourselves with the storytelling aspect of things as well. I mean, back in the day, I would share stories from my grandmother. It was very linear, as I would put it. And 10 years after, she came to the end, it was a very linear story. We then started incorporating that into different marketing objectives, in pharma, non-pharma, and then, in pharma when I joined in, omnichannel was the buzzword, as I mentioned earlier. And even in omnichannel, we were trying to orchestrate, presence at different eras, at different intersections, in different channels as well. But really, it was the same message that was coming in, and it was that I would say really up in peaks and valleys, ups and downs. But it was, if you still spread it out, it was a linear way of doing it. But what changed was when social media really took hold of a user, and then the user basically dictates when and how and where they come in on the storytelling aspect. So now we have a transmedia environment where storytelling can be, or not can be, but rather is very relying on the individual or a user, and you have to give them openings of where they come in. A very good example that I heard was the movie Avengers, right? So we saw the Avengers Endgame, but I was watching the Avengers movie based on Thor. I really like Thor, but my son was a Spider-Man fan. He didn't watch any of the Thor movies. I didn't watch any of the Spider-Man movies, but we were watching the Avengers movie where everyone was eating shawarma in the broken New York shawarma store, right? So everyone was sitting there, but that was my entry point. My entry point was Thor. My son's entry point was Spider-Man. So it's similar to that in terms of like creating their orchestration and creating our experiences where patients have their own entry point, healthcare providers have their own entry point, and give them the opportunities to showcase that our content, our technologies are evolving and adapting based on their daily using needs of technology, like a cell phone.
I love the journey. And it actually it leads nicely to where I think is intriguing about. I'm going to use maybe pharma as an industry from a broader perspective, not specifically. I'm not close enough to some of the stuff that may be in your unique elements, but it's a fascinating element of this question of what is the end user patient, what is the end user provider, doctor, how do you start to create a brand? What is the brand of a pharma company versus the drug? Work through this. And now actually, as we're seeing, a lot of our clients are now the different personalization techniques are coming through, and really even a lot of different life cycle of how you. So I'm just kind of curious in your role, again, how do you innovate? Thinking through this, it's a fascinating time. And I'm sure every country's got slightly different ways too of how they approach it. So I'm just like, I'd love to kind of know when you get it thinking about the business objectives of today that are most impacting you in this really rapidly changing way that you interact with really your revenue source. And I'm using that almost in a broad sense because it would be different things. I'm curious kind of how you're jumping into that.
Again, that's a very good question. And the way I look at it is it's very important. First of all, this goes back to the question of whether or not you should have a strategic North Star and what your strategic vision should be. Some folks, depending upon the way technology is evolving, are almost discounting that, which I think is a bit of a miss, because the way I look at it, I have my strategic North Star that is based on my organizational goals and objectives. So we had to have that, strategic vision. Then what you do is you take that strategic vision and then you start looking at your day-to-day operations, and you look at the innovations and the innovative ideas that would impact your bottom line, that would impact your the way patients or your consumers react and engage with the different channels and the mediums of the different pieces of content and technology that you have across the length and breadth of your ecosystem, right? And then you start really looking at the innovative ideas in terms of the optimizations, the efficiency at scale. But it all has to be a sustainable, scalable solution. So that's the underlying theme that should anchor everything, which should align with your strategic North Star. So you at least have a direction.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, it you can end up going into a loop of sorts, and then it just creates a churn. And that is where I think another segue to a point that I really would like to make, and the emphasis is that without having that strategic North Star, what ends up happening is you have transformation without compliance or guardrails. So that sort of transformation is actually an enemy of governance and compliance. So you end up having a situation where you're trying to innovate and transform just for the sake of doing it,
Yeah.
without having any compliance, governance, or regulatory guardrails, which are so important to have that right patient impact and treatment outcomes. And without doing that, you will always hit this brick wall of sorts, where your transformation is going to go to an entire churn and not go anywhere.
Yeah. So you can choose how far you want to talk about your present organization. I want to read, but I'm curious on that construct of how difficult has it been, or for you to align on a North Star, and again, where does that fit to where are you given your North Star? Where are you influencing, defining that? How do you package that? I'm just kind of curious, because that's a lot of what we do with all our clients is kind of some version of that story, and I really, it's such an interesting component of like, yeah, North Star to transformation to outcomes. Like, and I think that those are buzzwordy themes, and that's it, but they're actually, it's interesting. They're bubbling up again a lot right now.
Yes.
Because I think the amount of change. So I'm just kind of curious of where do you feel you have that North Star? Because I think that's, I don't want to bias you, but I feel like a lot of clients, they think they have it, but they really, it's not about communicating. It's a communication problem. It's really a definitional problem, what they're trying to be and what how it fits in.
And again, it all pertains to the leadership. And I've been fortunate enough to work in an ecosystem where our leaders are not only able to effectively but efficiently articulate the North Star, so to speak. So it's I think that is very, very important to understand the North Star from your leaders, and how it actually cascades down to the folks that are really working with the boots on the ground, trying to achieve to that goals or strategic objectives and the imperatives that they have set. And understanding that should be, I think, the main blueprint, if not the wireframe of sorts, right? And I apologize, this is what I was talking to Ryan, in our podcast.
Yeah, I apologize. You were giving us your time. There's no apology for you.
No, and not articulating it well, but there's this
That's my
conflict.
job not to articulate very well. You're the guest. You're supposed to be doing. You're doing great.
No, thank you. And structure is very, very important, right? So when you have this North Star, and the way I operate is structuring it, and the structure is very important to not only understand how you are going to create that roadmap, and then transforming your current initiatives and making sure that you articulate it back to the folks that you're working with, and in terms of collaboration and co-creation of going towards that unified vision. And I've been fortunate enough from my leadership to have that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and Kevin, I'm glad you brought this up, because from my perspective and what I've seen, as things change so quickly these days, right? It's, it used to be you could plan something for the year, and you're going to stick to that vision for the year, and then at the end of the year, you're going saying, okay, do we check all the boxes that we wanted to check? And now I feel like those boxes probably change every other week, if not sooner, with how fast things are moving. So, I've seen it a lot, and I'm curious your opinion about this. But it seems like not only is it important to align on the definition and the goal of the North Star and on what you're trying to do, but checking back in and realigning and having these hey, things have changed, or this is different now than when we first set our goals. How often is that happening? Is that something that, yeah,
That's again, it's a live wire of sorts to do this in the current day and age, right, where everything's working so fast. The technology is evolving so fast right now. When we started off with AI, it was just about AI providing you the outputs or some form of recommendation of sorts. Right now, it's coming more towards a decision making evolving into a decision making engine, where it's providing you recommendations that enable you to make decisions. And then very soon, you're going to have a layer of artificial general intelligence as well. But for me, the way I look at it, and it's again going back to the clear distinction of what are you trying to achieve, right? I mean, if it's just speed, speed is like, you can have a situation where you have Sandra Bullock driving you in a bus with a mom, trying to take you to an airport, but she's going around in circles. That's speed. You need velocity. You need velocity with a clear direction and an intent and an output. Right now, the way we are looking at it is not 100% autonomous, a silver bullet solution. No, what we're trying to achieve is, on a scale from 0 to 100, let's say 0 to 100, if AI can get you to that 60% mark, where it provides you with something that's good enough for you to iterate and enables you to do that remaining 40% a lot faster, that's success. But change management is a big part of it, because anything can happen between that 0 to 60. Technology is evolving, new platforms are coming out, something that you weren't accounting for just crops up, because AI is a bloom of 1,000 flowers. Like, how do you keep up with all of this? It's very important that you create guardrails, wireframes, in terms of a very clear objective of what you're trying to achieve. And when you get to that 60%, you make sure that you are able to articulate that 60% to the people that are using it. Because if you don't have user adoption, it doesn't matter what you're doing and the innovation that you're driving if users are not using it. So I think that's a very clear distinction between speed, velocity. Change management is again a big thing that is coming up, along with a lot of other things that people are not accounting for.
Yeah, it seemed like in previous years or in the past, the change management would happen after everything's already been decided, and now it's implementation time. Okay, we're also going to do the change management, but we're seeing more and more. And Kevin, feel free to disagree, but it's like at the start of these engagements, like that is a major component that people are considering. It is going, like you had mentioned, while bringing like regulatory alongside and compliance alongside and the marketing and the tech. Like the change management piece is right up there with all of those pillars
Yeah.
of we need to account for this from day one.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and I'll add in the addition to change management. It's interesting because I absolutely agree that it's at the forefront in a way that's really fun. Because I mean, oftentimes, you get these different story arcs, you talk about different seasons of like consulting projects, tech project, all these different elements. I would say that classical change management had actually, in some ways, I think, had fallen off a bit of favor. Clients never want to pay for it, just using that as our frame. I think internally, it's probably difficult to how you justify those headcount. But it is absolutely being in the forefront now. Some of that's transformation, some of it's traditional change, but a lot of it's org design, which again, my background, which is really around organizational behavior and behavioral economics. I love these themes because really, how do you maximize output and how do you maximize efficiencies, and really in a way that still creates an environment that's a thriving environment. And again, we talk about a ton on this podcast. I'm very optimistic and bullish on how the changes that we're seeing from AI are unlocking human potential, unlocking the way organizations can run. And the same change is radically changing what it's doing. And you have to be able to be comfortable in that environment.
Exactly.
And knowing that you're, from again, my chair of, in my role as leading North America, I mean, you've got, if I look at my internal role of that, I mean, you've got people at different stages of their career, different generations, different comfort levels. I think that to me is actually part of the excitement of what I get to do. I know that's also, challenging, but, so I want to like maybe go a slightly other pivot if you don't
Okay.
mind. That it's in the same theme, but I'm curious if you, just the way you're talking, you're thinking and learning, then that nature of like your role, nature of this, the way that I think it's probably the way that you present yourself. I'd be curious, whether it be in your company or it could be outside of that. What are some different changes, could be product technology that you've just really been excited about in the way that, I don't mean, pick your time frame 12 months back, or that you're
Yeah.
just, I'm not trying to frame the question, but
No.
I'm just kind of curious of like, what are some of the things that you're like, man, it is so cool that we're doing it this way today? And, or maybe something I didn't think that we're going to do it that way. I'm just kind of, because that's your professional innovator.
No. Thank you for saying that. And it's always about pushing boundaries of science, technology, and innovation. That's what my career has been all about. It's like trying to tap into the unknown and looking at the broader spectrum of things. You look at the current ways of working, which is generally the status quo, and this is where things start you start intermingling with the status quo and the innovation. You can't have both of them. There are trade-offs, so you have to have either or. And what was really exciting was to see in a setting, for example, where you have like these chatbots coming up, prior to the actual evolution of AI and agentics. There was a lot of chatbots that were coming up, and looking at chatbots and how we are using them as avatars and concierge on our website. And what was really interesting for me was to see or at least push to drive innovation to bring that in a setting where you can actually engage with them outside, website, which was very exciting to see. So this was something that I was, just again, pardon my ignorance in this. I was looking at maybe a technology of this size and magnitude in terms of like, a sustainable, scalable solution would be something that would be available maybe 3 years down the line, right? But at the way the technology is evolving, I was very surprised to see that, this was something that we were able to accomplish later last year in our current ecosystem. And, it was really groundbreaking to showcase the value proposition of an actual AI avatar interacting with you in a live setting versus you being the user and engaging it, on a website or web portal. That was transformational back then, at least. And this is what I'm talking about, like maybe six months ago. From that time to where we are right now, there's been a huge evolution of technology again, with the agentic framework, with the hyper personalization that is being driven at scale, brand concierge that are coming on the website that we saw at the summit, which is really exciting. But then, the taking all of this and then evolving this into something more tangible that fits your strategic business objective needs, but then again, the regulatory compliance guardrails is something that I'm really excited about. And I'm again, trying to push the boundaries of science, technology to see if we can develop something really cool.
Yeah, that's really exciting. This is interesting, and again, where the evolution of the chatbot experience and how it's played into to where it looks elements of that, and just even, I was looking at, yeah, we have two thoughts, but like one, I'm looking at some data that was in your industry, not your client, but just around the learning environments and using really taking some of that same interaction from the chatbot experience, really simplistically, but change that into a learning environment that drives really how you're driving sales or driving experiences, outcomes. And but with the part that was really intriguing to me was the customizable approaches of how we learn and adjust the sequences, and then the impact for individuals that are consistently in that training environment. And then now the leap that is until not all that interesting to tell you. I mean, obviously, if I do it more, I train more, but it's because the learning element of the approach becomes so much more real world. So now I'm interested, where's that bridge? So now where am I? Almost like you've been throwing movie quotes out here. So I'm going to give you one a movie quote or a
Yeah.
today. We're not quotes, but movies. Ender's Game. The idea of some classical sci-fi, but where are we? And I think we're in a training environment, and now we're not in a training environment. And I think that element of that to where you're going to have these supplemental experiences, whether it's a chatbot or it's learning. It's like I'm sitting side by side. Some of it might be helping me think about it, giving me access to things. But I think the lanes of like what is training, simulation, that element, and what is actual are just going to continue to come together. And I think the individuals that either embrace that experience where you almost have in some ways uh, someone sitting with you, walking through your job. That's you're doing your human inputs, you're doing the kind of the automatic self-learning, those components, and that's going to just accelerate what you're doing. It's going to be that comfortability that's a different way that we work. It's not like I go to a meeting, I get on a call, I get on a Zoom call, I go to this, we collaborate. Part of that collaboration now is going to be a self-learning component, and I get excited about that. Don't know exactly what that means. I mean, I challenge myself to think about how do I bring that into my day job. It helps me sleep a little bit more. That would be helpful. But like particularly here in Vegas. But I think it's fascinating to what it's gonna do. And I'm curious on how you're thinking about that for your world, for you as practitioner, but also your company.
So I'll try and answer your question, and I apologize if I go on a tangent. I love going on
I
tangents.
go on tangents. The former name of this podcast was Technology Tangents.
Oh,
So
there you go.
This is a open, welcome, safe space for tangents.
That's
So
perfect. And I'll go back to a point that I was trying to make earlier, during the course of our conversation, that AI, it learns, it adapts, and it's very good at assimilating, information. AI loves structure, by the way. So, where you have structured context, so AI thrives on context. That's very, very important for us to level set and understand. So AI thrives on context, it thrives on structure, it thrives on governance. By the way, people may like it or not, but it's very important that you have a structured, governed ecosystem for AI to thrive. So that's the first part, right? And then it can learn, self-evolve, with the evolution of technology and whatnot. But what is very, very important is like you mentioned, like how will it help me? How does it help me sleep more, for example, right? I think there is a clear gap in terms of how we use AI, and this is again my personal humble opinion that AI right now, what it does for you in best case scenarios across the length and breadth of not everything that I know, but things that I've touched upon, is that it provides you recommendations, right? So you might have a recommendation of you are trying to reply, simple as the simple example, you try to reply an email using an AI application, and it'll give you a recommendation of what the draft should be, and then you can make tweaks to it. I My humble opinion is that recommendation is good, it's helping, but it's adding more time for you. Instead of recommendation, it should give you decisioning. It should be able to provide you with a decision that this is what I've drafted and send it. This is what I have draft based on the articulation, understand it. So recommendation is good, but it often makes you ponder and create almost a churn of sorts. So you end up spending more time in terms of refining it. When AI comes to a point where it's providing you with the power of decision making, and you're just saying, okay, yes, looks good, boom, let's decide on it. That's where you're unleashing and unlocking the true potential of AI and really freeing your time and helping AI understand the autonomous decision making that comes into the picture with you as a governance body who is just saying, okay, yeah, this looks good, this is fine. AI can do that. So you can compartmentalizing things that can be automated versus not, rather than just relying on recommendations at best.
Sajid, I want to ask you as we wrap up here and bring it full circle. You talked about how these conferences are really important for these inputs. And
Mhm.
one of the things that we've talked about before on previous episodes is how do you keep that momentum when you go back
Yeah.
to your day to day. So we'd love to hear your final thoughts on that, and then we'll get you out of here onto the next thing.
No problem. And thank you for asking this question. It is a very fair point. As I said, it's an input, but input to what? You need to understand your day-to-day operations really, really well whenever you're in these conferences, right? Because when you see these demos, when you see the novel innovations that big technology providers are providing, you really have to understand the business strategy, the strategic outcomes, and the imperatives that you have outlined as an organization. And how do you take what they have showcased, but input that into your day-to-day operations? Like, where do you bring that in? And then you have to structure it in a very systematic way, because what you see in a conference is agnostic to any industry, right? They don't make it pharma specific or healthcare specific, or maybe a large organization that deals with multiple brands or of that nature. So it's an agnostic demo of innovation, but how do you then partner with them and create and translate that into a setting which applies to your own operation or your own function or your own organization and your own industry, and then blend it together? I think that is what excites the leaders. That is what would excite the folks that are working on the day-to-day operations of how it can create efficiencies and optimizations, and then you just have to build that narrative together.
Again, I'm gonna say thank you for joining. I think it's always fun. I mean, it's part of it for the juice for me for why we go to conferences, why we interact with clients. Is like so you and I've interacted a bit, not in person like this so much. It's always just fun to kind of say hi and get to know each other and really learn from each other. And I think that's the part that I would say that, again, for me, and kind of wrapping up this, I love that you get to think about how you take these themes of technology, process change, innovation, how you apply that into your ecosystem. Obviously, you're in a very interesting world from regulatory growth, change, dynamic. It's a for an environment that it's controlled that you're in. It's really cool the amount of change and really how you can actually influence sales and drive that in different ways. But for me, I just want to just thank you for the time, thank you for the message, and really around just a reminder. One of the things that we'll go back to is North Star outcomes, what we're trying to achieve. How do you incorporate change and learning in the middle of that? But at the end of the day, it comes back to how do you serve your customer? How do you drive revenue and profit? And how do you make sure that you have a compelling reason why we exist? And obviously, Adobe's trying to do that for the whole process here. You're trying to do that with your customers, whether it be internal or external. And so I just really appreciate that. And yeah, my last comment, Ryan, from here is just, I really appreciate the chance to interact with our clients, be in environments like this, have a chance to really, get everyone together and just I feel like I know I'm biased when it comes to the business drivers of what we're doing and the outcomes, but it just seems like the why we're existing, what we're doing, at the pace and change of why you do it is continuing to be at the forefront of the questions that our clients are asking right now. Um, that does lead to what tools and what's products and all that crap I should use. But at the end of the day, we're serving a product and we're serving an outcome that we're trying to get to. And I think the more you came to that, the more you go after that and be excited about how that changes your company, and you're going to be in a good spot. So that's my closing thought for you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Sajid, anything else you'd like to say before we get out of here?
No, I think, Kevin really articulated it very well. It's just a blend of things, and it's just making sure that you bring the right subject matter experts, the right teams, the right functions at the forefront. And it's all about co-creation. Innovation is all about co-creation. If you don't co-create and if you don't collaborate at the very forefront, innovation is very invasive. It will definitely, rub people the wrong way because, not that they're averse to innovation, it's just that you're not able to articulate how it impacts them and how it impacts the change overall in an organization. So I think co-creation and collaboration is my key takeaway.
Amazing. Well, Sajid, thank you so much for joining us. Sajid Sayed, a director of digital acceleration in the life sciences space. It's been an absolute pleasure for myself, Ryan, for Kevin, and for Sajid. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the True Signal podcast, reminding you to be bold and just be curious, y'all. Thanks. See you soon.